Hi, I'm Pat Ellers from the Fly Fishers in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I want to show you one of my favorite little streamers here. It's called the fur ball. It's a simple pattern to tie. Catches a lot of different species of fish, so come on along. Let's get this thing tied up, and I think you're going to enjoy it. All right, let's go over the list of materials you're going to need to tie the fur ball. We're going to use a Gamakatsu B10S. I like the size 4 with this. It's a great hook for it. We can just use a matching color, whatever thread you're using. 6/0 unit thread will work great. For the tail, we're going to use CCT fiber hair for the tail material. We're going to use a Grizzly saddle hackle for our lateral line on there. For the body, we're going to use CCT body fur. The eyes, we're going to use a 1/4 inch 3D holographic self-adhesive eye. And then to finish the fly off, we're going to use a Tough Fly epoxy kit with the blue light. All right, let's get started tying the fur ball. Fur ball is a really simple pattern that I came up with when these new body fur and tail fiber materials came on the market a number of years ago. And it's super simple, but it's really effective. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover the shank of the hook with thread. And I'm going to take some of the tail fibers. It's the same material as what the body fur is, just in a longer form. And I'm just going to tie this down somewhere on top of the hook shank. It doesn't really matter where. And I'm going to bring this back right over the barb of the hook. Is going to be my final tie-in point there. And I'm just going to bring the other piece back. I've got about 4 clumps on this. Comes on like a carded piece. It's bound together like a strung material almost. So 4 of those clumps ought to be a good amount to give you the right diameter. And then about the length of the hook shank is going to be where I want my tail to be. Maybe just a little bit longer. And I'm just going to hold those together, tie them off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this sideways. I'm going to take a couple of Grizzly hackles, and I'm just going to lay them flat on the hook shank. I'm going to tie one on each side. What this does is it gives me kind of a lateral line effect. I think it's a nice touch on the fly. So I'm going to tie one on my side, trim that one off, rotate the hook over, and on the other side, hold that in place, lay it flat, tie it on there. Come back over to that point, right over the barb of the hook. Just make sure our hackles are laying nice and straight, and we've got them there. And that's it for the tail. You don't have to put any flash material on here if you don't want. You can add some Flashabou, some Crystal Flash. But if you look at this material, it's actually got a little bit of flash built right into it. So here's the body fur. Here you can see that kind of chenille cord, whatever you want to call it, that binds all these together on that longer tail fiber. It's just a longer fiber here. It's a little shorter. This is what makes the body fur. Now I'm going to tie this in so that the fibers are going back. Strip out a couple of those fibers. Bind it down real well. And I'm just using a 6/0 thread on here to match the color of the fly that I'm tying. This one is silver gray. I'm going to come up front. And I'm going to tie this right up to the eye of the hook. I'm using a silver gray here. It's a great shiner imitation for our bait fish here in the Midwest. You can use this. I've caught fish on the Madison out in Montana. It works great for smallmouth in the streams here. And in chartreuse, I found this to be a very, very effective redfish fly down in the flats. Now I'm just going to palmer this forward. And notice by the way I tied that in, it just makes a nice full body going forward. be careful because this stuff can be a little bit funky at times. In the manufacturing process, sometimes there's some twists in it, and you may need to manhandle that a little bit so it doesn't roll and go forward like it did right there. And because this doesn't have any fibers going forward, it's pretty easy to bring right up to the eye of the hook and tie off and not be hard to trim out of there. So I'm going to get some good wraps behind the eye, take my scissors in there, get it as close as I can. Tie that off. Make a little head, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to whip finish this off. So you can see in just a matter of a couple of minutes, you pretty much got the fly tied. Now there's just a couple other things that I do here in the trimming of it. And what I do just to get a little nicer, neater head on there is I just take this with my thumb and my forefinger and I just start squeezing it and stroking it back. And what you'll get, see how you're starting to get that more narrow profile? I don't want it to be a big 360 degrees. I want that baitfish profile. And just by taking that, pulling back and squeezing it down, you'll get that nice baitfish shape. Now the next thing I do is I just take my scissors and I just kind of smooth out those edges, top and bottom. And if I got any flyers, I'll take and just lay the scissors on the side. Just kind of help me get that profile. And now I've got basically the fly is finished. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back in the vise here. We're going to attach some eyes to it. And I'm going to use a 3D epoxy eye, the adhesive back kind. And right behind my little thread head, I'm just going to put an eye on each side. And that's going to help. See how that's already keeping that profile nice and flat? And the epoxy backed eyes in there are going to help do that. Same thing on the other side, just make sure you got them even. Squeeze them down now. Those will come off of there. That adhesive holds them in place for tying the fly. But the problem is if you start fishing them that way, they'll come off in a matter of a minute or two once they hit the water. So what I need to do is lock that in place with an epoxy head. And the epoxy part is probably the hardest part about this fly, as you could see. But I found a way that's really easy to do that, and that's using a product called Tough-Fly. And the Tough-Fly is a UV light. It's the same thing basically that your dentist uses to fix teeth. And what it is, it's not a UV cure, it's a blue light cure on here. So it's a Blu-ray sensitive adhesive. And until you put that light on it, nothing's going to cure on this, whereas with 5-minute epoxy, you got 5 minutes from the time you start mixing it to get everything nice and perfect on here. Now I'm just going to glob some of this on. It looks kind of messy right now. That's not a big deal. Just get some of that on there. And I'm just going to take my bodkin and I'm going to work that around. And just make a nice neat head on here. Cover up the hook threads, and that way you won't have anything breaking your thread. And all I'm going to do is just put a little layer on here. And just let that set for me. You don't have anything to worry about as far as that stuff setting up. Just make sure you got it where you want it. You could literally go get yourself a cup of coffee right now, unlike 5-minute epoxy, and come back and finish it. And there we go. I've got those eyes locked in. I've got a little bit of epoxy, which will make a nice tight head on there. Super tough. And the other thing does is it adds a little bit of weight to the fly. Now, the cool part about this is I'm ready for it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my blue light from my Tough-Fly kit. This is a safe light on here. And I'm just going to hit this thing for about 15-20 seconds on each side. And that's all it takes to cure it. Now I'm just going to rotate the fly, get this side of it. And that should be it. Take that and touch that, and sure enough, it's nice and cured already. So there you go. Even with putting an epoxy head on this fly, in probably 3 to 4 minutes, you've got a finished fly that'll work for anything from smallmouth bass to redfish to big trout out in western rivers. There you go, the Furball. Give it a try. I think you'll really like this fly.